Good morning. My name's Steve Dunn. On behalf of all the Clarke family, I'd like to welcome you all to this celebration of the remarkable life of Frank Norman Clarke. Frank was the patriarch of a large clan. 4 children, 13 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren. Unfortunately, some of the family cannot be here today, including several that are overseas, so the service is being recorded for those who are unable to attend. My welcome is extended to all absent friends. I'm privileged to have known Frank for quite a number of years. As a young man, rekindling an infanthood friendship with John, I met Frank and Esma at their home in Floralia Place. I'm allowed to say Esma now, it was always Mrs. Clarke then. We met many times since then, usually over one of Clarke's home brews, and I developed a great respect for the man. Rarely short of an opinion and prepared to defend it, he would happily extend time and good humour to listen to the views of others. Frank was egalitarian, non-discriminatory, always treating you as an equal in thought, even from a young age. Frank wanted a secular service. He was a man who embraced technology, mastering digital cameras, computers, smartphones. So the family thought the museum, as a venue for today's celebration, was an appropriate location for someone with his technical background and interests. Even though he wasn't religious, Frank attended church as a teenager and a young adult. The Sermon on the Mount seemed to him to be a pretty good guide for life. I invite family friend George Garnsey to speak to us. George.
Steve, thank you for your welcome. I will not read the whole of the Sermon on the Mount because it's about 3 fairly long chapters, but I will read perhaps the best known part of it, which are the first 10 verses, known as the Beatitudes, because the first word in each verse is the word blessed. And it begins like this. It's the 5th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, beginning at the first verse. Seeing the crowds, Jesus went up on the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for justice' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." It's a very great honour for me to be present with you today at the invitation of John and Margaret as we celebrate the life of Frank Clarke. We mourn our loss of him and we rejoice in our memory of him, his family and his friends. I owe a great deal to John and Margaret for many happy experiences and pleasures we have shared. A love of good music, good poetry, good cricket, wine. As one of Australia's leading radio broadcasters, John benefited St James Church Morpeth, my church, handsomely when we staged concerts that raised funds for the restoration of the church's historic pipework. John kindly allowed me to promote the concerts by interviewing me on radio, by telephone. He also delighted me by inviting me to officiate at his and Margaret's daughter's wedding and at several family baptisms since that happy event. And I should also mention that John and our mutual friend Paul Bevan, also famous for radio ABC music, for interviewing me with some tricky questions about God. He did give me some notice, usually about 24 hours, and say, on the day before Ash Wednesday, George, what on earth does Ash Wednesday mean? I'm going to ring you up at 11:15 tomorrow morning and put you on the spot and ask you to explain that. And we had many good times together. But John has asked me to offer you a reflection on the words that you've just heard. They're called the Beatitudes because the first word of each verse is the word blessed. They form the first part of 3 chapters of teaching by Jesus, written down after being heard and remembered by the first followers of Jesus. Written down so that after the first followers, succeeding generations might remember them also. And Steve has just told us, John too has explained to me, that his father had been baptised in the Anglican Church, but had then joined the Brown Street Congregational Church because of its active youth movement. Then he moved away from Christian belief, but retained a lifelong passion for social justice, egalitarianism and world peace. As he approached the end of his life, first he said to John that he wanted no ceremony at all. But as he and John talked further, he agreed to the shape of today's celebration. To honour his wishes, it is a secular ceremony, but he did want it to include this part of the Sermon on the Mount. For the writer of St. Matthew's Gospel, for Christians, for others, both believers and unbelievers, the Sermon on the Mount, and especially the Beatitudes, sound the keynote of the new age which Jesus came to introduce. For the people who first heard and read these words, they were like new wine, radically different from the wine which the religious leaders of Jesus' day, Pharisees, Sadducees, the scribes, were offering the people. Jesus got into trouble with these leaders because the Matthew who he called to follow him was a tax collector, very unpopular. Matthew made a great feast for Jesus at his house. And the gospel that bears his name tells us that many tax collectors and sinners came and sat down with Jesus and his disciples. But when they saw this, the Pharisees said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." So Luke's Gospel has a supporting story of Jesus preaching in his local church. "The Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed," quoting the prophet Isaiah. For St. Luke and St. Matthew's Gospel, Jesus fulfills that prophecy of the Messiah, the anointed one who was to set up the kingdom of God on earth, longed for by the people of Israel, a kingdom of peace, justice, hope, love. In the Beatitudes, you have a picture of the life of that kingdom. Jesus is bringing good news to the people despised by the Pharisees. The poor, the meek, the powerless, the people on the margins of society who didn't keep the whole law as interpreted by the Pharisees. Who are the people who are blessed, truly happy, regarded with favour by God? Not the rich and powerful, but the people who had no one to stand up for them. And not only those people, but also those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called God's children. They're not merely peaceable in inverted commas, but they work earnestly to make peace real in the lives of other people. Frank Clarke had this hunger and thirst for justice, for equality, for those who suffered injustice and poverty and and discrimination. You suffer from oppression, abuse, and from violence. And when these wrongs are put right, you have a just and lasting peace in which all the world's people will benefit. Frank embodied these teachings, these verses. They unite all who share his passion for justice and peace, believers and unbelievers alike. We rightly celebrate today and hereafter the life of this great man, his great family and his friends, an inspiration to us all.
Thank you, George. Regardless of their age, when a parent slips from our presence, it's the most difficult times. You may well say it was a good innings. Any batsman chasing his maiden century would not be happy with dismissal of 97. Frank had an undeniable belief in himself, another of his marvellous attributes. He knew where he was in this world, and he was happy to be there. Scott, Frank's son, will reflect on this.
Good morning. I'd like to read a piece by Aaron Freeman to the unbelievers. Obviously, I know that Frank was certainly one of those. It's titled, "Do You Want a Physicist to Speak at Your Funeral?" You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy, so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you'd hope that the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell her that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children. Their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let her know that all the photons that bounce from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes. That those photons created within her constellation of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much of all our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves with the programs as he says it. And he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in life, is still here. Still part of all that we are, even as we who mourn continue the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should not have faith. Let them know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound, and that they'll be comforted to know that your energy is still around. According to the law of the conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly. Amen.
Thank you, Scott. Frank had a deep love and knowledge of classical music, especially the music of Beethoven. But rather than the symphony or a concerto, a simple piano piece has been chosen today, Bagatelle number 25 for release. John, Anne and Philippa all learned this piece, so it was played often in their family home. The version we're about to hear is by Vladimir Ashkenazy. Apparently Frank and Ez returned home excited from an ABC concert at the Century Theatre and said they'd seen the pianist of the future. They weren't wrong. Frank loved the poetry of Robert Frost. This poem, Stalking by Woods on a Snowy Evening, published in 1923, is somewhat enigmatic. Many feel the poem can be construed as a dreamlike image of someone passing away, or saying a final farewell. It will be read by Frank's grandson, Philip and Jack's son, Tom Vale.
Whose woods are these? I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop at our farmhouse between the woods and frozen lake, the darkness near here. He gives his mother's bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds and sweet of easy woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
Thank you, John. Bertrand Russell wrote, "An individual human existence should be like a small river. Should be like a river, small at first, narrowly contained within its banks and rushing passionately past boulders and over waterfalls. Gradually the river grows wider, the banks recede, the waters flow more quietly, and in the end, without any visible break, they become merged in the sea and painlessly lose their individual permanence." John Clarke, Frank's eldest son, now present eulogy.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming today. When I was writing this, I was reflecting, I was thinking, how much time can you give a eulogy? And I was hopeless at maths, but even I could work out if I gave a minute to each decade down the lead, then the eulogy can go for a minimum 9.75. Let's see how we go. When a person's life is spanned in etc., it's amazing the history they've experienced. When Dad was born, Billy Hughes was the Prime Minister of Australia. Lloyd George was still the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And Warren Harding had just succeeded Woodrow Wilson as President of the USA. And even though he would be probably 180, Warren, when you come back, will be President of the United States. But that's another story. In popular culture, Wyatt Earp was still alive. Charlie Chaplin was the King of Hollywood, and Don Bradman was 7 years away from making his test debut. Australia was still coming to terms with the awful price the Great War exacted and the following influenza epidemic. Frank Norman Clarke was born in Cessnock on the 12th of March 1921 to Frank Henry Clarke and Myrtle Clarke nee Handley. He was the eldest child and by all accounts possessed an inquiring mind and an interest in all sorts of things from an early age, something that was to prove useful 3 years later when the presence of a porcine attraction named Billy the Pig at the Cessnock show ensured his absence from home during the safe arrival of his sister Patricia, our Auntie Pat, who's with us today. Dad had a few memories of his childhood in Cessnock. He recounted to us on one occasion his father taking him to hear the first Australian radio broadcast in about 1924. On another occasion, he recounted his descent by bicycle down the hill towards the Neath pub. The road was unpaved, of course, and he said it was rather scary. Well, it would have been. He was only 7 or 8. The family lived in 2 houses in Cessnock, the first in Chichi Street, that no longer exists, the second in Halcyon Street, that's still standing. Frank attended both primary schools in Cessnock, spending the most time at West Cessnock Public before the family moved to Newcastle in 1930. They moved into Silso Street, Hamilton South, and Dad attended the Junction Public School. Stories of young Frank the student were sketchy, but a surviving textbook with the inscription, "Clarke is a smart aleck," may provide some insight. Dad did the assessment tests and was admitted to Newcastle Boys High School. He did his first year of high school in 1933 at the old school on the hill in Newcastle. And we believe he was, if not the only surviving student who attended both schools, one of the very, very few. He moved to the new school at Waratah in 1934 and is in the photograph of that first General Assembly. He told us that many of the staff were returned soldiers, some of whom had been terribly gassed. One of the members of the languages staff was a young teacher named Charlie Goffin, who many years later taught me French at this high, and who became an occasional dinner companion at the legendary Hamilton Italian restaurant Sonia. Frank had the Leaving Certificate in 1937, obtaining a Teachers' College Scholarship, a Public Service Scholarship, and a Metallurgy Traineeship. Perhaps it was inevitable that his interest in science and technology would lead him towards metallurgy and remaining in Newcastle, or perhaps he had already noticed a pretty young Mayfield girl, Esma Simpson, but he commenced work at John Lycett and studied at Newcastle Technical College. It was also about this time that he met a young Austrian Jewish refugee, Paul Reed. Fearing the rise of Nazism and realising that it was inevitable that Austria would be consumed by Germany, Paul's family had saved to send him to Australia. Tragically, almost all the rest of his family were exterminated in the concentration camps. Dad and Paul became firm friends, a friendship that endured until Paul's death several decades later. It was also obvious to that young generation they would soon be fighting a war. Indeed, as Dad said to me, it wasn't a case of if, but when. And to that end, he joined the militia in the artillery. He attended a few camps, firing off First World War 18-pounders, which he said was quite fun. His relationship with Esma Simpson had developed into something serious, and in May 1940, they made a commitment to each other, funnily enough, as they gazed out over Nobby's Beach at the grounded coastal steamer Mainbar. A group of their young friends had heard about the incident and raced off to have a look, rather reminiscent of another grounding at Nobby's some 68 years later. When war was declared, Dad was declared to be in a reserved occupation, working in the industries. But nevertheless, he signed up for the RAAF in 1940. Whilst he was waiting, he was involved in the refinement and manufacture of the Owen gun, which went on to have lasting fame on the Dakota track. Finally, in 1944, he was called into the Air Force. Wanting to be an air crew, he'd been told by a friend that he'd had no chance asking to be a pilot, but to ask to be a navigator instead. Imagine his surprise when at the selection board they said that they had enough navigators and had been selected for pilot training. Following his basic training, Dad was posted to 8 EFTS Narendra and did his first dual flight on the 21st of May. Believe it or not, that aeroplane still exists and flies to this day. He went solo on the 4th of June after 8 hours flight. On the 2nd of July 1944, Dad went on a night across country with Warrant Officer Rich, W.O. Richard's daughter and son-in-law, Kay and Jit Fumang, today. At this stage of the war, with the Allies succeeding on most fronts, flying training was being wound down. So after doing his basic flight training, Dad was posted to Melbourne to do clerical work, which he did from August 1944 until February 1945. Meanwhile, his personal life was going along very well. He and Esma were engaged, and he enjoyed spending time with her and her family when he was on leave. With doubts about the war against Japan, Dad was called back to flying in February 1945, first with a refresher course on Tiger Moths, then to twin-engine training on Avro Ansons. Following the victory in Europe, flying training was cancelled almost immediately, and Dad went back to Melbourne with 100 hours on Ansons, well above what a student would have had earlier in the war. He and Mum were married at Brown Street Congregational Church on the 27th of October 1945 and commenced married life. They lived in the bachelor flat in the Moorings in King Street, Newcastle, in what they both described as some of the happiest years of their life. Dad's scientific bent leading him to make experiments with a honey tip. He found that by adding malt, hops and yeast to water, one ended up with quite palatable substance. When they discovered that Mum was pregnant with the first child, me, they realised that a bachelor flat was going to be a bit squeezy for a family, so they set about acquiring their first house. House buying after the war wasn't an easy task, but eventually they found a house in Docker Street, Marks Point, and moved in. With no car, travel to and from Marks Point must have been an arduous undertaking using the bus. I was born in April 1952 and spent the first 2 years of my life there, and when Mum became pregnant with my sister Anne, they decided to get a house closer to Newcastle, and they bought 58 Bella Street, Adamstown, and we moved in before Anne was born in June 1954. Philippa followed in 1956 and Scott in 1964. We lived at Bella Street until 1969. Dad had always been interested in photography and had persuaded John Lycett to let him establish an industrial photography department, which he did, and he remained at Lycett at Mayfield and then at Kembla until his retirement. He was a pioneer in industrial high-speed cinematography, sourcing a camera and equipment from Germany. This shot filmed up to 2,000 frames per second, allowing extremely close examination of metals and their fatigue levels. He was extremely proud of this part of his work. To help get some extra money, Dad spent most of his Saturdays as a wedding photographer, working for Kennedy Studios at Mayfield. Many of the weddings he shot were of European families, and he became a photographer of choice for many Italian, Greek, and Eastern European dynasties. He was very interested in their cultures and food, And this crossed over into our home lives. We were the kids at Adamstown Primary, still understand. No discussion of our father's life would be complete without a chapter on motoring. We didn't get our first car until 1956, when Dad acquired a 1948 Vauxhall 14. Now, this was a pre-war car that was rushed back into manufacture after the war as a stopgap measure. And by 1956, although only 8 years old, looked like a relic from another era. By this time, motoring was obviously a commonplace event with reliable motor cars. In our family, it seemed almost an adventure. Never wait knowing whether we'd arrive at our destination or not. Dad used to take pride in never overloading the fuel tank. His idea of a successful mission was to glide into a service station with the engine misfiring as the last vestiges of fuel was fed into the carburettor. Breakdowns were common, and one's tender age was not taken into consideration when assistance was required. I'm going to tell you one story about the motoring. It was on the Stockton Punt. Those of us who are of a certain age will remember the Stockton Punt. For those who don't, it was a steamship in which cars crossed from Newcastle to Stockton. And the cars were parked about an inch apart. One day, in this Vauxhall 14, Dad noticed that it wouldn't start. The ring gear had gone, so he said to me, "Get up and give me a push." I said, "What?" He said, "Get out and give me a push." I said, "Well, on the pump." He said, "I don't know." And there was that much. So I clambered out of the car, 8 hours, clambered onto the front mud guard, bumper bar of the car behind me, saying, "Float." And there was a bloke sitting there with me. And I pushed the car for about an inch and Dad clutch started it and not prevent it. Now, as a result of that, I have always had cars with manual transmissions because you never know if you might have to clutch start a car in half an inch. We had a succession of colourful vehicles. One at Peugeot used to emit a thunderous explosion on shutdown. And I believe Anne and Philip used to implore Dad to drop them off a couple of blocks away from their school. Personally, I could never understand that. I loved a car that sounded like a cannon. Anyone who knew Dad knew of his deep love of music. He became interested in classical music in the 40s and used to listen to records and talk music with friends for hours. He was deeply knowledgeable and amassed an excellent record collection, and he was very proud of our humble musical endeavours. He was a voracious reader, often having 2 or 3 books on the go at once. Dad had a deep love of food. This is evident from an early age, and now we must go back to about 1927, when Dad was 6. His mother took him and his little sister Patricia to her native New Zealand to meet her family. By all accounts, the crossing was extremely rough, and Nana was violently seasick in her cabin, so little Frank took charge. He and his 3-year-old sister sat in the dining room at breakfast, and Frank ordered had kittens. History doesn't relate how much the infant enjoyed the fishy meal. A chance drive one afternoon in early 1969 led Mum and Dad down to the radio place in Mountain Heights, where they found several blocks of land that were for sale, but they were under the radar, as it were. They bought a block, built a house, and we moved in 1970. Mum and Dad stayed at 34th Aurelia Place looking at their beloved bush until Mum died in 2015, and Dad moved out at the beginning of 2017. Anne, Philippa and I didn't spend a great deal of time there, but Scott did. He grew up and had many adventures in Blackbutt Reserve. Scott was also a great support to Mum when Dad was moved to Port Kembla and spent a couple of years staying there during the week, coming home at the weekends. Dad then entered a new phase of his life, that of grandfather. He decided he'd like to be called Gramps, and that's how he's known, not only to his grandchildren, but to their partners as well. As that generation had children, the name was modified to Great Gramps. And at this moment, he has, as Steve said, 13 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. All bar the last 3, who are recent arrivals, have met him, spent time with him, and have wonderful memories of him. With retirement came the opportunity to travel both overseas and here in Australia. A trip to Italy allowed him to put his love of ancient history into perspective. He and Mum travelled far and wide around Australia in a reliable vehicle at this stage, with a tent in the back and never too far from the bush or the beach. Dad hated articles. He liked people to be themselves. He was a strong advocate for social justice, a Republican, and proudly voted yes at the marriage plebiscite. He often quoted Abraham Lincoln's mantra, "Actions speak louder than words." He also took a keen interest in the environment and wanted a paper or cardboard coffin. We overrode that. But that magnificent coffin there is an enviro coffin. And I reckon He was an amazing scratch cook, could make a wonderful damper in a camp oven, and loved grilling meat over an open fire. Talking about grilling meat over an open fire, another memory that will never leave me is the day we had the picnic barbecue in the rain. Dad's idea of picnic barbecue preparation was a couple of pounds of lamb chops, a box of matches, and a wire back doormat, which we'd pick up on the way to the car. That was the grill. On this day, it was raining quite steadily when we arrived at our destination. Undaunted, Dad got some rocks, lit a fire, whacked the doormat on top, and set to work, feeding the family huddled in the car lamb chop sandwiches through the window. Only recently I mentioned this to him and how it was amazing that he managed to get the fire going, let alone cook lunch. He said with a conspiratorial smile that it was easy when one had 11 try cooking the food. I think an image of that day may materialize later. I mentioned that he had an inquiring mind. He once told me as we stood around the fire grilling meat that he'd made charcoal as a work. When I asked why, he looked at me as a foreign idiot and said, to make gunpowder, of course. Of course, that's the lead of it. Mum's death in December 2015, shortly after their 70th wedding anniversary, came as an awful blow to Dad's to all of us. I think then he had a glimpse of his own mortality, as he was then well over 94. Nevertheless, eventually he realised that to keep going, he had to keep stimulating, and so he launched the trip to France. He wished to travel to the Western Front to celebrate the centenary of his own father's arrival there, Sergeant Frank Clarke of the 35th Battalion. He sounded Philip and me out, we had a good long look at it, consulted the doctors, decided it was feasible, and off we went in October 2016. To see Dad with his head bowed at the 3rd Division Memorial at Xavier was a truly moving experience. Dad lived at home in 2016, doing pretty well, but requiring constant visits and ever-increasing medical appointments. He was aided, and Mum as well, by the support of some wonderful neighbours, Warren and Tanya, and Christian General Lee, who are here with us this morning. There is no doubt that their affection and assistance prolonged Mum and Dad's stay in their home. Frank was still in good spirits, and on one occasion told us about some of his unusual dreams. One would suffice, it's a quickie. He dreamt he was at the vet's with his pet on a lead, and the woman sitting next to him said, that's an interesting animal. What is it? He said, wolf. And she said, well, what does it go by? And he said, Bobby. Of course. He was also becoming something of a celebrity. Because of his advanced age and mental acuity, Dad was asked to and accepted an invitation to take part in an audio interview here at the museum, recording his early life in the school days, especially at Boys High. This he conducted with aplomb, and the recording is now part of the National Sound Library. And I believe this eulogy is to be included in the museum's collection. And a little over a year ago, through the organisational skills and contacts of Scottish Life held, Dad was invited to RWA in Richmond, where he was shown over the base, had a guided tour of the C-27J Spartan aircraft, and flew the Hercules simulator, performing a touch and go at Lord Howe Island with seeming ease. The instructor rider remarked that he'd seen a lot worse from current RWA pilots, which quite reasonably He was also interviewed by the Maitland Mercury, and brusquely said he didn't know what all the fuss was about, but was secretly chuffed. By the end of January 2017, it was apparent that Dad could no longer live at home. He was increasingly frail, so he spent the next year with Marg and me. It was a very happy time for us all. He spent a lot of time outside in the shade reading, and when I say reading e-books on his tablet. Dad was computer literate, had a PC, a tablet, and a smartphone. He spent countless hours editing and scanning photos on his PC, some of which you'll be seeing later. Towards the end of last year, we realised that Dad needed more acute and comprehensive care than we were able to afford. And so we looked around for a facility that he would enjoy. A nurse suggested the Opal model, and upon inspection we suggested it was Dad. After a momentary hesitation, he agreed to give it a go, and upon securing a place, moved into Opal Hillside, Mount Hope. It turned out to be one of the best decisions that he'd ever made. He had a lovely room, had a 24-hour room service menu, Foxtel, and the internet. He received wonderful, compassionate care from a group of dedicated and caring professionals. Much to his surprise, he became a firm favourite with the staff and was the oldest resident. He made some new friends, and rapidly became one of the founder members of the Opal Hillside Wine Appreciation Society. And one of his mates, John, has joined us today. Dad retained his mental faculties right to the end. Recently, he asked me if I could find his volume of Cicero. I stupidly inquired if it was an English translation. The answer predictably was no, the Latin. He was feeling a little rusty and wanted to brush it. A couple of months ago, he contracted pneumonia. The old man's friend, he informed me cheerily. He fought it well, but in the end, the tank, like that old foxhole, ran dry. And he peacefully left us last Wednesday afternoon. So, how to end? Why not with some Cicero? As I said, it was a voracious read. Sic hortum in bibliotheca habes deirit nihil. Says it all, doesn't it? I'm sure I don't need to translate. Oh, I do. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. Vale.
Thanks, John. I did say it was a remarkable life. We're about to hear another piece of music that Frank loved. Romance from the Gadfly was written by Dmitri Shostakovich, who's a Soviet composer known for his huge orchestral writing, but he also possessed a deft, light touch. This beautiful piece is played by the Scottish violinist Nicola Benedetti. Hank's granddaughter, Erin Clarke, Scott and Raquel daughter, now read 2 poems from the Ruby album on Market Poem.
Before I begin with the poems, I'd just like to say a few words of my own. Gramps was one of a kind. He was a gentleman. He was an intellect. He was caring, mischievous, clever, loving, and generous. He was a true fighter to the very end. The special moments I had with him are memories that I will cherish forever. Like our games of Trivial Pursuit, where he would beat us all with his extensive general knowledge. And the time he and I walked along the Swansea Channel, as he had done in the years gone by with Granny, it was important to him that I saw it too. Now, here are 2 short poems, both of which Gramps loved. They are 2 poems from Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The moving finger writes and, having writ, moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a run, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. And as much as wine has played the infidel, and robbed me of my robe of honour well, I often wonder what the vintners buy, one half so precious as the stuff they sell.
Thank you, Aaron. Frank and Ez loved My Fair Lady, as did many people in the 1950s, and even to this day. Prior to its Australian release, if anyone had a friend going to the United States, they were begged to bring back a couple of copies home in their suitcase. People would have parties to listen to this. The original Lerner and Lowe mono version was on the Clarke household phones. This morning we'll hear Wouldn't It Be Lovely from the soundtrack.
It's rather dull in town, I think I'll take me to Paris. The missus wants to open up the castle in Capri. Me doctor recommends a quiet summer by the sea. Wouldn't it be lovely?
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of chocolate for me to eat, lots of coal making lots of it, warm face, warm hands, warm feet. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, so lovely, sitting absolutely still. I would never budge till spring crept over me windowsill, someone's head resting on my knee, warm and tender as he can be, who takes good care of me. How wouldn't it be lovely, 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 lovely.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair.
How wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of chocolate for me to eat, lots of coal making lots of it, warm face, warm hands, warm feet. How wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, so lovely, sitting absolutely still. I would never budge till spring crept over me windowsill.
Someone's tender rested on my knee, warm and tender as she can
tripping the light fantastic. We're just going to pause now for a period of quiet reflection. On the screen, you'll see Scott Clarke's beautifully curated representation of Frank's life. The variation Nimrod from Edward Elgar's Variations on an original theme, Enigma, with its magnificently emotional melody, is perfectly suited to pay tribute to Frank. We've mentioned that, well, John mentioned that Frank was technically capable. In the 1950s, he built his own hi-fi, building the amplifier and assembling all the other components. This equipment served him well for a number of years, despite the children's plea for a stereo. A song of reproduction was played on that equipment, and the family knew by heart the words to all the Flanders and Swan songs.
May I ask, could you hear all right on the top deck up there? Could you? It was all right, was it? All right for quantity. There's nothing very much we can do about quality at this stage, I'm afraid. Not until Swan's voice breaks, anyway. People do make an awful lot of fuss about the quality of the sound they hear, though. Have you noticed? They spend all that money to get the exact effect of an orchestra actually playing in their sitting room. Personally, I can't think of anything I should take more to have an orchestra. They seem to like it. Anyway, it's about then that we've written this next song. I mentioned this in case you should think that the title is a little near the bone. Those of you who've bought programs. It is, in fact, a song of reproduction. I had a little gramophone, I'd wind it round and round, and with a sharpish needle it made a cheerful sound. And when they amplified it, it was much louder then, and you sharpened fibre needles to make it soft again. Today for reproduction, I'm as eager as can be. Count me among the faithful fans of high fidelity. High fidelity, hi-fi's the thing for me. With an LP disc and an FM set and a corner reflex cabinet, high frequency range, complete with auto change. All the highest notes, neither sharp nor flat. The ear can't hear as high as that. Still, I ought to please any passing bat with my high fidelity. Who made this circuit up for you anyway? You bought it in a shop? Ooh, what a terrible job. You've got your negative feedback coupled in with your push-pull input-output. Take that across through your redhead pickup to your tweeter. If you're modding more than 8, you're going to get wow on your top. You try to bring that down through your rumble filter to your woofer. What'll you get? Flutter on your bottom. High fidelity, FFRR for me. I've an opera here that you shan't escape, on miles and miles of recording tape. High decibel gain is easy to obtain with a tone control at a single touch. I can make Caruso sound like Hutch. Then I never did care for music much. It's the high fidelity.
You feel to be joining John? As John mentioned, Frank and Ez enjoyed a long and happy marriage, just over 7 years. They were devoted to each other, and this beautiful sonnet by Shakespeare seemed to sum it up perfectly. Sonnet 116 was read by Frank's first grandchild, John and Margaret's daughter, Emma Stark.
Let not to the marriage of train minds admit competitors. Love is not love which alters in alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, his words unknown, although his height taken. Love's not time's fall, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickles compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never bit, nor no man ever cried.
Thanks, Emma. We've now reached the end of the formal part of the celebration of Frank's life. The family wish to thank you for coming. They appreciate that someone travelled quite a distance to attend. The family would also love you to join them back in here in a few minutes for refreshments. John and Scott will now escort Frank outside, and they invite you to follow. The music accompanying the entourage is the Dam Busters March by Eric Case. Frank loved this march. He actually knew a couple of the Australian Dam Busters. Thank you all very much.
hello there. I'm glad you were able to make it. Unfortunately, recent events have precluded my attendance today, but my spirit is with you, and I hope that you all enjoy this occasion as much as I would have had I been permitted to join you. I'm often asked, how does one achieve longevity of the nature that I have? Well, I'm well into my 90s now, as you can tell. But the answer is, I think, choose a good partner to start with, who makes life a joy, and then raise a family of whom you're very proud, and then to go with that, enjoy the vices that have been vouchsafed unto us, as you might say, in that a lit few beers, some nice wine, good company, good music, and those things that have made, in my case, life enjoyable. Well, people tell me that I should try to keep my mind as active as possible. Well, I do. I try to. One of my favourite programs is Eggheads on the television. It's a quiz show, and I find that I irritate people by shouting out the answers to questions, or the few questions that I happen to know the answers to. But anyway, I also find that I was going to say mastered, I haven't mastered it, but I have been using a PC now for a number of years. When I was first given it, it had me completely baffled. It was far too technical for me. But I played with it for a while, and eventually I plucked up the courage to go online with it. And I found then that I didn't write letters anymore. Emails became the means of communication. And then printing photographs, I found that a very interesting attribute of the computer. I also have a tablet that has, well, actually it has probably more books on it than I shall ever read. And it is, I have not been to a public library now for years. We're trying to catch up with the quantity of books that are on my tablet. Also, I have what is called a smartphone. Now, this is a mobile telephone, as you know, which is very much smarter than I am. Oh God, there it goes again. Just a moment. Hello?
How are you? You going all right?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. Still breathing. As Scott's here at the moment, he's actually recording the. He calls it a eulogy, but it isn't really. It's just a talk that I'm giving to the people at my wake.
Do we have a date for that yet?
I beg your pardon?
Do we have a date for that yet?
No, not yet. No, no, I don't have the date for that. And as a matter of fact, I would not like any comments about any preferred date. I'm attempting to prolong that as long as possible.
I think that's a very good thing.
But you never know, as the man says. So
You never know.
I've been rambling on here now for quite a while. If you can imagine what it would sound like. Anyway,
I think it's fine.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
All right, talk soon. Bye.
Yes, well, that's another intrusion that one gets at any time of the day or night nowadays. The mobile phone goes with you and you're never out of contact. But anyway, to cut a long discourse short, I'd like everybody here to enjoy, eat, as I say, drink, and be as merry as you can on my behalf. Now, if the drink is not up to your standards, let me know when you see me next, and I'll do something about it. I'll hoard somebody.